Welcome to the Deep Sleep channel. Tonight we're exploring a concept that was inspired by an idea from Nathan, creator of the Deep Sleep channel. This is a concept that will stretch your mind and change how you understand existence. We're asking questions that have no answers. We're contemplating possibilities so profound that they challenge the very meaning of reality. What if our universe is not all there is? What if it's a bubble floating in an infinite void? What if that bubble could collapse? What if it could leak? What if it could merge with other universes that exist in parallel to our own? What if there are catastrophic events so incomprehensible that they could end existence itself in an instant? What if the expansion of the universe suddenly reversed? What if the light itself was being crushed, extinguished as the universe contracted? What if the entire cosmos turned black in milliseconds before being crushed into nothingness? And what if, after all of that, after the universe collapsed completely, what remained was not just emptiness, but absolute nothingness? What if there was no space left? What if there was no time left? What if there was no possibility of anything existing? What if the universe collapsed into a state of complete, absolute, total nothingness? These are not just wild speculations. These are theories that physicists discuss. These are possibilities that emerge from our best understanding of physics and cosmology. These are the frontiers of human knowledge, where science meets philosophy, meets mystery. Close your eyes. Let yourself contemplate the uncontemplatable. Let yourself imagine existence in all its fragility. Let yourself understand that the universe you know might be just one bubble among infinite bubbles. Let yourself envision the sudden darkness if expansion became collapse. Let yourself imagine what absolute nothingness would be like. Let yourself drift into sleep with the knowledge that we live in a cosmos so vast and strange and fragile that it defies comprehension. This is a meditation on existence, on the unknown, on the infinite, on the fragile nature of all things, and on the concept of absolute nothingness. We begin with what we know. We know the universe exists. We know it is vast beyond comprehension. We know it contains billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, each star surrounded by planets and moons and asteroidal belts. We know the universe began about 13.8 billion years ago in an event called the Big Bang. We know that at that moment all matter and energy and space and time came into existence. We know that the universe has been expanding ever since. We know the universe is still expanding. We know that the expansion is accelerating. We know this acceleration is caused by something we call dark energy, which we do not understand. Dark energy makes up about 68% of the universe. We do not know what it is. We do not know where it comes from. We do not know why it causes acceleration. We know that the universe contains matter and energy and space and time. We know these things interact according to the laws of physics. We know these laws are universal. The same laws that govern atoms on Earth govern stars in distant galaxies. But what we do not know is whether our universe is all there is. What we do not know is whether our universe exists in a larger context. What we do not know is whether there are other universes. Let's contemplate the idea of nothingness. Let's try to imagine a blank space. But there is no space, because space is something. Space is a dimension. Space has properties. Space can be measured. Space can be curved. Space can contain things or be empty of things. But space itself is something. So there is no space. There is no blank space. There is no background. There is no canvas upon which nothing is painted. There is no place where nothing exists, because a place is something. A location is something. The very concept of location implies space. So nothingness is not a place where nothing exists. Nothingness is the absence of places. It is the absence of space. It is the absence of the concept of space. Let's try again. Imagine a time before the universe existed. Imagine a time before time itself existed. What was there? The answer is there was no time. There was no before. Before implies time. Before implies a sequence of moments. Before implies that one moment comes after another. In true nothingness, there is no time. There is no sequence. There are no moments. There is no duration. There is no change. There is no possibility of change because change requires time. So nothingness is not a moment in time where nothing exists. Nothingness is the absence of time. It is the absence of moments. It is the absence of duration. It is the absence of change. Let's try to go deeper. Imagine no energy, no vibrations, no waves, no fields. In our universe, even empty space is not truly empty. Empty space contains quantum fields. These fields have energy. These fields can create virtual particles that appear and disappear. But in nothingness, there are no fields. There is no quantum vacuum. There is nothing at the microscopic level. There are no particles that could possibly pop into existence. There is no energy for those particles to borrow. There is no possibility of existence. Imagine no consciousness, no observers, no minds, no brains, no nervous systems, no life, no organisms, no cells, no molecules, no atoms, no protons, neutrons, electrons, no quarks, no strings, no space for anything to exist in. Complete absence, total void. Not a void that exists in space, but the absence of space itself. Not a void that lasts for a moment, but the absence of time itself. Not a void that could potentially be filled, but the absence of any possibility of being filled. This is hard to conceptualize because nothingness is incomprehensible to minds that evolved in a universe of somethingness. Our brains are designed to perceive things. Our consciousness is based on the existence of things. We cannot truly imagine non-existence because the very act of imagining requires consciousness, requires a mind, requires existence. But we can try to understand what nothingness means. Nothingness means no possibility. It means no potential. It means no latency. It means that even the possibility of something existing does not exist. Even the potential for something to come into being does not exist. In our universe, there are physical laws. These laws allow for certain things to happen. An electron can move, a star can burn, a galaxy can rotate. These are all allowed by the laws of physics. But in nothingness, there are no laws. There is no framework. There is nothing that could possibly happen because there is nothing and there is no place or time for anything to happen. Let's imagine what would happen if the universe collapsed completely, if the big crunch occurred, if all matter and energy were crushed into a singularity and then somehow annihilated completely. At first, there would be a singularity, a single point of infinite density, infinitely compressed matter. But even a singularity is something. It exists. It has properties, even if those properties are extreme. But what if that singularity were then annihilated? What if all the matter and energy were converted into nothing? What if there was complete annihilation? Then there would be nothing left. But what would nothingness look like? It wouldn't look like anything because there would be no light to create an appearance. It wouldn't feel like anything because there would be no sensation. It wouldn't exist because there would be nothing to exist. But here is the truly incomprehensible part. Even after the universe was completely annihilated, even after all matter and energy were gone, would nothingness still exist? Would there still be space? Would there still be time? If there is space left, then nothingness has not been achieved. Space is something. Space is a dimension. Space can be measured. If there is time left, then nothingness has not been achieved. Time is something. Time allows for change. Time allows for the possibility of something happening. So true nothingness would mean no space and no time. It would mean the complete absence of the framework in which anything could exist. But here is the paradox. If there is no space and no time, then in what sense does nothingness exist? If nothingness doesn't exist in any place or at any time, then does nothingness exist at all? This is the ultimate philosophical question. Can nothingness exist? Does nothingness have any existence, even as a concept? Some philosophers argue that true nothingness is impossible. They argue that even nothingness is something. Even the concept of nothingness is something. Even the absence of things is something. Others argue that nothingness is the natural state. They argue that existence is the anomaly. They argue that nothingness is what would naturally be if the universe didn't exist. But if nothingness is the natural state, then why is there something rather than nothing? Why does the universe exist? Why does anything exist? These are profound questions that science cannot answer. These are questions that philosophy grapples with. These are questions that human consciousness has pondered for millennia. Let's imagine the state of absolute nothingness more deeply. Let's try to understand what it would be like if nothing existed. First, there would be no possibility. This is perhaps the most important aspect of nothingness. Not only would nothing exist, but nothing could exist. There would be no possibility of anything existing. There would be no potential. There would be no latency. The very concept of possibility would not exist. Let's contemplate what this means. If nothing could exist, then the universe could never have come into existence. If true nothingness prevailed, then there would be no Big Bang. There would be no creation. There would be no Genesis. But the universe does exist. We are here. We are conscious. We are observing. This means that true nothingness does not prevail. Existence does exist. So the question becomes, why is there something rather than nothing? Why did existence arise from nothingness? Some physicists argue that the universe could have created itself. They argue that quantum mechanics allows for things to pop into existence from nothing. They argue that a universe could spontaneously arise from a quantum vacuum. But a quantum vacuum is not nothing. A quantum vacuum is something. It is a state of space filled with quantum fields. The quantum vacuum has energy. The quantum vacuum has laws governing its behavior. The quantum vacuum is not true nothingness. So the question remains, why is there something rather than nothing? Let's imagine the moment of the Big Bang. The universe came into existence. From what? From where? The honest answer is that we don't know. Science cannot explain the origin of the universe because the origin of the universe is by definition beyond the framework of physics. Before the Big Bang there was no universe. There were no laws of physics. There was no space. There was no time. There was nothing. Or was there? If there truly was nothing, then how did something arise? From nothing? By definition, nothing produces nothing, unless something can arise from nothing through quantum mechanics, unless nothingness is inherently unstable, unless nothingness tends to produce somethingness. This is the frontier of physics. This is where science meets philosophy. This is where human knowledge reaches its limits. Let's think about what would happen if the universe completely ended. Not just the collapse of space and time, but the complete annihilation of existence. Let's imagine that every particle is annihilated, every atom is destroyed, every photon of light is extinguished, every quantum field decays to a lower energy state, every dimension is collapsed, every moment of time passes, and then there is nothing left. What would be left? Nothingness. Not an empty space, not a vast void, but the absence of space itself, the absence of the framework in which anything could exist. Would that nothingness persist? Would it continue forever? But forever implies time. Without time, there is no forever. There is just nothingness. Would nothingness create something? Would from pure nothingness something arise? Or would nothingness be stable? Would nothingness tend to persist? These are questions that perhaps can never be answered. They are beyond the scope of human knowledge. They are questions that border on the meaningless, because to ask them we must use concepts like time and space that would not exist in nothingness. But let's contemplate these questions anyway. Let's imagine that the universe completely ends. Let's imagine that everything ceases to exist. Let's imagine absolute nothingness. In that moment of nothingness, would there be any possibility of the universe arising again? Would there be any potential for creation? Or would nothingness be absolute and eternal and unchanging? If nothingness is truly absolute, then no universe could ever arise from it. Nothing could ever exist again. The state of nothingness would persist forever, except that there would be no forever because time does not exist. But perhaps nothingness is unstable. Perhaps nothingness tends to produce somethingness. Perhaps the very nature of nothingness is that it cannot persist. Perhaps the universe must exist. This is a profound idea. The idea that nothingness is less natural than somethingness. The idea that existence is the default state. The idea that from nothingness something must inevitably arise. If this is true, then even if the universe ended completely, even if everything was annihilated, eventually a new universe would arise. New somethingness would emerge from nothingness. The cycle would begin again. This brings us back to the multiverse. If universes are bubbles floating in an infinite cosmic foam, if some universes collapse and disappear, perhaps new universes are constantly being created. Perhaps the foam itself is the nothingness that gives rise to universes. Perhaps universes are the way that nothingness manifests into somethingness. In this view, nothingness is not the absence of the foam, but the foam itself. The foam is the substrate of nothingness. Universes bubble up from the foam and then collapse back into it. Existence is temporary. Somethingness is a transient state. Nothingness is fundamental. But this is speculation. This is philosophy dressed up as physics. This is the frontier where human knowledge becomes uncertain. Let's contemplate the idea that we live in a bubble that could collapse at any moment. Let's contemplate the idea that our universe could be crushed into nothingness in seconds. Let's contemplate the idea that all of this, all of existence, could end and be followed by absolute nothingness. This is terrifying. This is incomprehensible. This is the ultimate truth that humans must face. That existence is fragile, that somethingness is temporary, that nothingness is potentially eternal. But here is the paradox. If nothingness is eternal, if nothingness is the fundamental state, then how do we exist? How do we have consciousness? How do we experience? How do we know? The answer is that we exist in a moment of somethingness. We exist in a bubble of existence that has arisen from nothingness. We experience one particular universe, one particular timeline, one particular possibility, but that bubble could collapse. That somethingness could end. That moment of existence could terminate, and then what? Then nothingness. Not a comfortable void, not an empty space, but the complete absence of possibility, the complete end of everything. Let's try to imagine what happens after the universe ends. What is left when nothing is left, but we cannot imagine it? Imagination requires a mind. A mind requires consciousness. Consciousness requires existence. If nothing exists, then there is no mind to imagine anything. So after the universe ends, there is no imagining. There is no experiencing. There is no awareness of nothingness. There is just nothingness. And in that nothingness, is there a possibility of something arising again? Is there a chance for a new universe to be born? Or is nothingness stable and permanent? We don't know. We cannot know. These are questions that are beyond the scope of human knowledge, but we can contemplate them. We can meditate on them. We can let them stretch our minds and challenge our understanding of reality. Let's imagine the moment when the universe completely ends. The last star burns out. The last black hole evaporates. The last particle decays. Everything is gone. And then there is nothing. No space, no time, no particles, no energy, no light, no darkness, because darkness requires light to be absent, no color, no sound, no sensation, no mind to experience sensation, nothing. In that moment, is nothingness aware of itself? Is nothingness conscious, or is nothingness completely unconscious, completely inert, completely static? If nothingness is conscious, then nothingness is something. It has consciousness. It has awareness, but if nothingness is completely unconscious, then there is nothing to know that nothingness exists. So in nothingness, there is no knowledge, there is no awareness, there is no experience, there is just matter, absence. We come back to the fundamental question: why is there something rather than nothing? Science cannot answer this question. Philosophy cannot answer this question. Human knowledge reaches a limit. We are conscious beings in a universe of somethingness, asking why somethingness exists rather than nothing. Perhaps the question is unanswerable. Perhaps it is beyond the scope of human understanding. Perhaps it is like asking what is north of the North Pole. The question is meaningless. Or perhaps the answer is that there must be something. Perhaps nothingness is impossible. Perhaps existence is necessary. Perhaps the universe must exist. But we don't know. We cannot know, as we drift into sleep, contemplating the universe, asking fundamental questions about the nature of reality. Sleep peacefully. Sleep knowing that right now, in this moment, you exist. That is enough. Good night from the Deep Sleep Channel. Sleep well and dream of existence and the mystery of somethingness.